So, we have a number of migrations under our belt now. And as I'm reading my speaker notes and I was thinking about this, some of us have more under our belts now than others, that notwithstanding. We thought we'd share some of our experiences with you. We're nearing completion in one migration in particular that has some interesting twists, such as hardware integration. So we thought we'd do a case study presentation. We'll describe the situation that led up to the project, our process in delivering that project, and what we learned along the way. I'll begin by establishing some context, and then turn the presentation over to those who did the heavy lifting for their input and their perspective. Located in Salt Lake City, Utah, Hudson Printing is a 100-year-old printing company that creates beautiful books, catalogs, magazines, you name it. If it can be printed, Hudson can print it. Their motto is reinvent print. From their website, I'd just like to tell you what it says. Reinvent print. We know it sounds a little crazy to reinvent a 500-year-old media, and perhaps it is. But we think that a big change is long overdue. In an increasingly digital and connected world, it's easy to see print as old school, simply ink on paper. Reinvent print means exploring the intersection of print and digital media to discover and exploit the connections that can make the combination dramatically more valuable than either could alone. It also means leveraging the beautiful, tactile, enduring qualities of print and blending them with the best features of the digital world. I absolutely love that. So, how was Hudson Printing, specifically through their utilization of software technology, doing in achieving their mission? Sending out an SOS, sending out SOS. Okay, we'll keep the day job. But in our case, SOS means state of software. See how I did that? So, over the last 30 years, Hudson and Chain had developed a software application. See how familiar this might sound to you. Hudson had developed a software application that integrated with the analog print presses and accounting software. It was powerful, it was reliable, it was stable, allowing them to run their business efficiently. However, the hardware was aging. It was difficult to maintain. It's hard to find parts for the job controllers. The software, while feature-rich and stable, was over 30 years old and was developed, operated, and maintained by one guy who was nearing retirement. It was increasingly becoming an obstacle to change, making it hard to accommodate new opportunities, hard to live up to that motto of reinventing print, let alone reinventing print. It became clear that a change was necessary. Since they were in the printing business, not the software business, they decided to solve these issues by pursuing off-the-shelf software. We often see, however, that this doesn't solve problems, it simply replaces a set of problems with a different set of problems. As Bill described in his kickoff session, the new software was inflexible to the point that it would take Hudson's key business differentiators, custom printing, the ability to do a big run of magazines, but send 10,000 over to this state with one insert and 10,000 to that state and so forth and so on, but it would actually lengthen the processing time. So in the end, it simply could not match the years of business knowledge that was built into the application, and the project was shelved. Take two. What do we do? What do we know here? Well, the software is written in Synergy, so theoretically, it should work on any supported platform that Synergy supports, okay? Not only VMS, which it was on, but Linux or Windows. So how about we build as opposed to buy, but not from scratch and with some help. We can solve the resource problem by bringing in an experienced team to the table. In addition, we can port to a platform that the client feels is easier to find local resources to support. We can solve the stagnation problem by upgrading to the latest version of Synergy, which opens up all kinds of possibilities, including data replication, new user interface, whatever have you. So PSG essentially could do the migration and provide a platform for the future. How do we start? That's the question we get often, right? How do you engage? What's the first step? First step is typically an on-site system assessment project. On-site visit is typically how we learn enough to help a customer. We come on site to review system usage, explore source code, meet with the decision makers to understand the business. First and foremost, we have to understand the business. Does the business do? Why are they in business? What is the business doing, okay? What are its goals? Number two, what's the application? How does the application serve its purpose in regards to, number one, the overall environment? What is the hardware infrastructure? How is it serving the needs of, number one, the business? Okay? After the meeting, we'll create a PCR and a POC. Our PCR is our post-consulting report, status and recommendations. POC is a proof of concept, small-scale project with estimates for the migration. Let's talk a little bit about those deliverables. The initial deliverable of any system assessment is a report, which we call the PCR post-consulting report. This provides detailed findings and recommendations for next steps. The report is the property of the client, right? So they can use it in their assessment and planning. It could be the end of our relationship. We hope not, but it could be. They could take that report and chop it around and see what they want to do. They can actually use it internally with their resources. It all depends on the goals of the project, or they can hire in third-party consultants. Oftentimes, and it was the case here, the PCR becomes the basis for the next document, the SOW, or a statement of work, for the next phase of development. We like to do things, we walk before we run, we do things in phases. Talk a little bit about what we learned. What did the post-consultant report contain? So we knew it was VMS. Where was it in VMS? 8.3, not too bad, pretty recent. 2 servers, 2 custom production RX 3600s, running OpenVMS 8.3 and Synergy 915. Also various DEC hardware. So here becomes the details that the devils are in. Including the DEC Server 200s and various VT420s or PC-based emulators. Remember, at this point, we're thinking a migration might make sense. We're not convinced what platform we're going to move to, okay? So we need to scope out what would be changed if we move from VMS to something else, okay? Moving to any other platform, this stuff is going to be an issue. Talk about the application functionality. There's 2 custom production systems in use. The job system is a completely custom printing business system with integration to printing presses via PLCs, programmable logic controllers, that are 30 years old, and you can't find parts for, by the way. System is architected in one executable with 300 some options built as subroutines in an object library linked to a menu program. Pretty common. There are also a number, like 2,000, of standalone programs available to run as individual run commands. So here's the beginning of our scoping of the project. System appears to be architected simply, efficiently, effectively, which will facilitate migration and maintenance. I saw Jeff the other day talk about his system started with MCBA. It's all over the place. It's what we know. We see it all the time. Okay, so we understand that stuff going in. However, the simple, efficient, effective facilitation of migration and maintenance is offset by lack of documentation. Again, a pretty common thing that we run against. There's also an accounting system. Accounting system is a customized data vision down-to-earth system. Version 7 written in Synergy, written in DBL with customizations. Handles standards accounting functions like AP, GL, payroll, rolled over to GL. There's about 4 users of this system. Among the customizations are interfaces to the job system. And the way they did these interfaces, they did it at the code level. They actually changed programs to open up files on the other side, on both systems. So the job system opens up files over here in the accounting system opens up files here. So pretty customized. So, good news, we have source code. Excellent. About 2,000 plus source code files. Lots of programs. Actually pretty typical in what we come across in a migration. Bad news, hard coding. Woohoo! Hard coding is rampant, okay? We find this a lot, but it's an issue, right? It's kind of a double-edged sword. Hard coding's great, it's stable, it gives them exactly what they want, but then when they gotta hire somebody and change out the roles, They actually wrote applications that said, well, if you're this guy, you can do this, and if you're that guy, you can do that. Well, that's not great. Maybe we need to think about a role-based security model or something. Hardware ID. Hardware was built into the system. So we talk about 4 giant printing presses. Well, if it's printing press 1, we're going to do this. If it's press 2, we do this, so forth and so on. Okay. It's stable, but it impacts extensibility. What things will need to change no matter where we go? Well, obviously we know to look for the VMS stuff. The VMS stuff, what is the VMS stuff? System services. In this case, they're few and far between. Not a whole lot, don't have to worry about a lot. We do have a plan when we need to change them, find their analogy in the different platforms that we might move to. In this case, it's not going to add a whole bunch of scope. VMS directory syntax, we know to look for hard brackets. Hard brackets are VMS slashes, typically Windows. So where do we find that? It wasn't in the code. Another good thing, more or less, it was more in the command procedures. We know we need to take command procedures, we need to turn them into batch scripts, whatever we need to do, moving to another platform. Deck style keyboard functions. Well, there we go. This is going to be a fun one, because we know the FT420s that you guys probably remember have a certain set of function keys which do not map necessarily nicely to a Windows terminal. Batch execution queues, nightly interfaces, nightly batch queues. These are things that we'll have to find an analogy for. VMS print queues obviously do not exist anywhere but VMS. They do a lot of reporting, they have label printers. How are we gonna do that? And last but not least, the LAT terminal servers. So they had LAT terminal servers talking over serial communications to the PLCs and the PLCs to the presses. Something has to change there. Okay. All right, we think that we would like a migration. We think that it's going to solve a lot of problems. But I'm not sure, Don. What's that going to look like? Well, we do a proof of concept. Often the next thing that we do after a PCR is a proof of concept. Proof of concept in this case was taking their source code and doing a quick build on it. We're looking to build the foundation routines. We're looking to do a quick build. It's not going to be anything that we would ever install or go live or any of that, even test. But it gives you an idea. Okay, that's kind of a warm and fuzzy about what this thing might look like. And we did that. Steve did a quick build, took a relatively short amount of time, and we come up with a demonstration on, remote demonstration. Okay, maybe we could move forward. This is kind of what it's going to look like. Got it. Okay. Hudson was having problems, remember, finding VMS resources locally. We don't come in ever on a project. I've had this discussion 4 times, 6 times over the past 3 days. We don't come in and say, well, you need to be on VMS, and you need to be on Windows, and you need to be on Linux. There's a lot of good reasons for whatever platform you are. In this case, through sitting down with the client and understanding the local economy, understanding their particular requirements, we agreed, after discussing the pros and cons, that we're going to move to Windows servers. Keep the application, lose the risk. The software will essentially look and behave the same as close as we can come on Windows. Obviously, remember, we have different keyboards, different print interfaces, but again, that stuff will ease the cutover. We're going to do a lift in place. And not only lift in place, but provide a platform for future growth. We're going to upgrade Synergy to the latest version of Synergy and set the stage so that we can do a data warehouse, so that we can do UI, so that we could do integration to the new presses. Okay? We'll try to find the areas where we can improve without necessitating a complete overhaul. Okay, so now we're talking about moving to the next step. What are the goals of this project? Okay, we want a modern environment. Remember, our problem is resources. We want to put something in place that is available, that we can bring new resources on to code, to maintain, etc. Okay, we want to make sure it's configurable. We don't want to have to call somebody when we need to add a print press. We want to be able to have a parameter-driven system so that we can bring on new business, so that we can be agile. We still want to be stable. We also want to leverage what we know. Remember, we don't want to throw away the system. This is years and years of running a print business. We kind of know what we're doing. We want to keep that, we want to leverage that, but at the same time, provide a platform for moving forward. On the development side, we want to provide these tools. We want to provide Visual Studio. We want to allow them to hire kids out of school that understand how to program in this environment. So Visual Studio, again, providing a path to perhaps user interface modernization as well. Hardware-wise, we're kind of stuck with these presses. These presses are doing the bulk of the work here, okay? However, if we move away from VMS, what changes? Well, we know that the terminal servers are going to change. Okay, the LAT's out. The VMS system changes. The VT's got to change. So we want to keep the press. Maybe we want to keep the PLC to start. But we know that, again, we're trying to do as little as possible in the first phase. So what do we have to change out is the DEC hardware. The PLC, well, can we still use that? Yeah, I think we can. The concept is they talk serially. Well, they make serial cards for Windows. They're called rocket ports. There's many different kinds. But you can talk serially. So instead of throwing out the PLCs, which took a great deal of programming to talk to these print presses, we'll keep the PLCs, okay? We'll install rocket port. Once we get the wiring straight, I think you might, we'll be able to use that. And that way, and then we'll talk over network protocols to terminal server, then to terminal server sessions. So direct replacement, once cabling was right, thin clients and PCs replace the VTs. But again, think platform for future. We have the press, we have the PLC, we have the rocket port, but now we can think about maybe a new PLC. Okay, taking that PLC, once we have things moving, the business is running, we're on our new platform. Where we want to go in the future is enabling the digital press. Well, to get the digital press, maybe we got to be on a network. Instead of talking serially through these DEC ports, to these rocket ports, we're gonna put a new PLC in and talk to the digital presses. That's the platform for the future. Data visibility and replication. I think you guys know about that at this point. If you don't, we did a bad job this morning. I think you do. But that's the idea. Let's be in a situation where we can do replication. Let's be in a situation where we could move forward to data warehousing. So we call this a lift in place plus. Okay? It solves the issue of the lack of the open VMS experience, allows the use of Synergy 10 features, such as IO hooks, etc., for data replication, and find places where we can improve and maybe introduce some new UI. Okay, what's this look like? Feel very strongly that this is a project that to be done in a certain amount of time, right? We have a time frame here. We kind of looked at this and said, well, we feel like maybe half a year we should be able to pull this off, okay? Based on what we know. What kind of team would be required to put that together, okay? This is that typical kind of team. We have the team here. Strategic manager provides vision, oversight, liaison, okay? A business analyst, again, these are roles. So one person might actually do two roles, but these are the roles that are separate and distinct and require separate and distinct experience and skill sets. A BA, collaborate with the customer to understand the business needs and create requirements definitions. Project management, tie it all together. Perhaps the most important role, this person keeps the focus, communicates with the client, facilitates the project, and allows people to do what they're good at. A technical leader. Technical leader is someone that's going to come in and say, okay, we have to do this. How can we do that? Well, I don't want necessarily, this is more of an architect type role. This is a guy who's going to come in and say, okay, let's do it in this fashion, maybe do one and show how it's done, and the developers will take over from that point. And then obviously the people that do the real heavy lifting are the developers. But even here, I think it's important, depending on how you're trying to hit your critical path, to parcel out your development tasks so that you can run in parallel. We're trying to get time to market here, okay? And quality assurance. And in our case here, it has proven, at least to this point, the most important and probably best decision we made was to have such a focus on QA and testing. It's going to make the cutover much easier than it would have been alternatively. What are the tasks in a project like this? Well, we got to get the stuff built. We know we have these function keys. We got to go from VT to Windows. We got to handle the printing. We have report printing. We also have a very process-oriented label print, which drives the process from taking an order in and takes it from the print to the bindery to the mail room, all the way through the process. We have a number of batch scripts that do this, and we need to take these batch scripts, we need to convert them from DCL to BAT files, for example. A number of interfaces that are architected to run from VMS. What could we use in VMS? But we know we have to talk to our various trading partners. How are we going to do that? Press integration. We need going in. This is the biggest part. They're a printing business. This press integration is a big part. Unit testing and QA at each step. UAT toward the end. Remediation, and soon, cut over. As we get into our project, these are our processes, these are our procedurals. You know, we're a virtual team. We are remote. However, it's important, I think, to establish relationships, to get on site, to meet face to face, to write on that whiteboard, and to really understand the business. So we have an initial kickoff. We come on site. We have an initial kickoff meeting. We also probably have another meeting at the end when we do cutover. Virtual, daily stand-ups. Important to stay in touch with everybody, and we have a weekly client touch base. So these are our processes for any project that we do. An initial kickoff, daily stand-ups, weekly client touch base. Agile artifacts. I won't go as far as to say we're strictly practicing Scrum, but you know, when you review the use of Scrum and Agile, these are the kind of ideas that you use. You have a team with defined roles. You have your daily stand-ups, everybody meets. The idea is to understand where everybody is and not lose touch. We have weekly client touch points, and we have weekly reporting, and we have the basic concepts of Agile, because we started without detailed specifications. We knew these were the stories, we knew these were the tasks that we had to do, and then we get into them and we provide enough time to review them, understand it, and execute. So, what did we learn? Well, I could tell you what we learned, but it's probably better to bring in the people that actually did the heavy lifting to tell you what they learned. So what we're going to do is something new here. I hope this works out. We're going to turn it over. You got a microphone?
I do.
Okay. This is our lightning presentation round. It's not the heat lightning, which took a half hour. This is hopefully, we'll do a few minutes on each. We're going to bring up the people that worked on the project. We're going to talk about, a little bit about what they did. And then we actually have Mike Golding from Hudson Printing. He's here as well. And we'll open up the panel to questions after we show you some things. Okay, so first up we have the project manager, Sharon Dolan, talking about project management on the project.
So as Don mentioned, our focus going into this project was not to re-engineer the Hudson printing system because their business logic was solid. It was highly customizable and it was very intelligent. Our goal was to migrate that. We upgraded the DBL and Synergy, and we also took it to a different platform. We took it to the Windows platform. So we wanted to keep our changes to a minimum. That's not to say while retrofitting the code we didn't come upon issues. We knew that we would have to look at printing. Printing's going to be handled differently from the VMS to the Windows system. We also knew that key mapping, so going from a VMS to a Windows system, and not a lot of navigation issues were going to be presented, or changes were going to be presented to the users. So we kind of broke that out already. We knew that going in. It was scoped out. A work breakout schedule was put together, knowing we had to attack those areas. So we kept very focused in what we were doing, knowing that we had to focus on those different areas as separate work initiatives to move forward to our end goal. So we always kept in mind our deadlines and our goals. Some issues we did come across. So as you are upgrading, you're going to find things that the customer says, that may be a little weak in our system. Maybe we could do. Well, developers are artists. We get a hold of that and go, wow, we could do this great stuff. That all got put on wish lists. Is this something we need to have by the time we go live, or we don't? So we did track all those issues, and if we have time, they're not issues, they're more wish lists, they're enhancements that we would like to make. After we reach our goals, after we reach our deadline, we'll look at those things, we'll scope them out, we'll build prototypes for them, we'll tell you what we can do. We want to be transparent, but we don't want to lose focus. We need to get to our deadline. So the way we manage our source control is we use GitLab. So the developers are in GitLab already. We don't need to take them out of that. We actually can build our tasks in GitLab. You can build out a Kanban board. So we would meet, our daily team would meet, and we would go over the Kanban. We had task lists out there. Are they complete? Are they not complete? They can also add issues to the Kanban. It was a great way to communicate. We also have a documentation section with the wiki that we can upload and attach all of our documentation for implementation notes. So the customer has access to this. Mike will have access. He'll go in. We've actually built labels and tags to build issues. So not only do we have our internal QA, which we'll move things when they're developed, we'll move them over to the queue for QA. They're ready for QA. QA picks it up, passes it, moves it on, or puts it back. We also had labels and tags for the customer to come in when the UAT testing was done. They would put in an issue, and we would know, we could be able to define that issue, raise it to a higher priority, address the issue, and move it on. So it was a nice way to keep the communication flowing and defined how far we are in our progress to meet our deadlines. Also, we implemented UAT trainings, which was great. Not only did you do your QA trainings, when you went into user acceptance training, they were invaluable. The customer really benefited from that because there are certain things when a user's doing training that they will find versus when our team does it. It also helped us train them and get over the navigation differences. So we found that was very valuable and really helped the process in the user acceptance testing.
So I'm thinking of changing my middle name from George to Scope, actually, because it seems like every discussion that we have is around scope and protecting creep. And one of the things that I charge Sharon with is, let's find some tools to do project management here and get professional about this. And she has mined the use of GitLab unbelievably, that we can do not only source code control, which we knew going in, but actually project management, task management, document repository. It's really a very, very useful tool for more than just source code management. So kudos to you for that, for finding that. Next, we're going to bring up Mr. Hoffman.
There's a couple of things that we found as we were doing some of the migration. One of the areas that we noticed is in prototyping, because all of a sudden now everything has to be prototyped, including the mains, because we're putting this all through Visual Studio now. And so we did run into some prototyping issues that we had to address. Nothing major. Most things could be addressed with defining routines as having mismatch arguments, that kind of stuff, where you knew that there was one main that was passing in alpha, another one that was passing in a decimal, but it was being treated as an alpha. You could just define that as a mismatch parameter, and that dealt with a lot of the prototyping issues. A few other things we had to tweak into, look into a little bit deeper, maybe change the calling program to pass in the appropriate thing. So, not a huge deal on the prototyping. Toolkit was an interesting one. This was very, very interesting. Kind of found this out the hard way when all of a sudden we were getting invalid subscript errors all over the place. You used to be able to pass in an array to the I routines, like an I input. You could pass in an array. Well, you're not really passing in an array when you use an array name. You're passing in the first element of an array. But Toolkit would actually figure out what the heck you were doing. Well, since 9.5, I think it was, they tightened up Toolkit to generate a runtime error on this, because you can get all sorts of oddball issues doing this. So all we had to do was take this scenario, put it inside of a record, and pass the record into the I input, and that solved those types of problems. So this was one area where we had some challenges. Another one that we don't actually have a slide for, but it became pretty apparent. If anyone's ever gone from VMS to Windows with Toolkit, you can tell when you get to the end of an input set, it does the make corrections or press enter to continue thing. Well, that kind of destroys the flow of a normal Windows input type of a thing. So we decided to put OK and cancel buttons on the Windows as well.
Great idea. Another thing I'd like you to just spend a second on is, obviously the press integration was a big deal. Okay, so we knew that we wanted to get the Rocket port involved. We knew we could do serial communications. You wrote a program to try to open that up. Talk a little bit about that program.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to talk about at this point. Basically, the presses, the PLCs, were actually hooked up to a LAT port that would, basically the PLCs would be like sending out a couple of carriage returns. That would cause the LAT port to automatically log in. The LAT port was set to do an auto login to a very specific VMS account. The VMS account would run a login.com that would set up some logicals that were important, and then would auto run a program. Whoa, no LAT ports. Okay, so what do we do about this? So I just decided that we would just write what I called a serial port watcher program that basically kind of did the same thing. It mimicked it. It runs as a Windows service. It mimics what was going on with the LAT server and was kind of keying off of these multi-carriage return type of things and says, oh, okay, well, when that happens, let's set up these logicals that are based on a configuration file that the customer can now maintain the configuration file themselves. It would then launch as a DBS process the same program that was running before on a LAT port on the VMS machine. It does the exact same thing. The only thing that we had to change inside that program to make it work is, as opposed to opening up a terminal port and doing a reads on the terminal port, what we did is instead we took that part out and we're opening up the COM port and doing a loop of accepting characters looking for particular things. And everything else, the entire program runs exactly as it had before, and all we had to do is tweak it to use a COM port instead of to use a terminal port.
So we had this theory that would work. Thank you for proving the theory. I really appreciate that.
So anyways, it does work out. So yeah, so that's what we did there.
Awesome.
I think that was it for me.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. We're going to bring up Lloyd next, and you know how we talked about our hotkeys, the differences between the terminals.
Yeah, it turned out that hotkey migration was a little more complicated than we originally expected. You're going from a VT environment to Windows. We set up an initial cross-reference, being this is what we really needed to do. We developed it early on, and we gave it to the client and said, this is your options. What do you want to go with? And that was the Windows key map. Turns out that during unit and QA testing, we found a lot of inconsistent application of hotkeys. Program to program, the same hotkey would do different things. Application to application, the same set of hotkeys would do multiple things. We also had source code with hard-coded hotkey definitions for the screen help embedded in there. So we went back and we found some also, the Windows equivalent map that we had, we used some frequently used hotkeys on the DEC keyboard. We changed it to a 2-keystroke thing, and that turned out to not be very efficient. So taking all of those things into mind, we created a hotkey map of where the keys were and what they did, and gave the client alternates that we can map these hotkeys to this, and we got their approval, and then we went through and cleaned up the hotkey mapping, and they're pretty happy with it at this point. The Open VMS file system also had some challenges. Automatic versioning, if you're familiar with Files 11 in VMS, you can open the same file over and over and over again in the same location. It just creates a new version number, which doesn't exist in Windows at all. So VMS was more forgiving when the code opened a file, forgot to close it, and went back and opened it again. That continued to blow up every time we were trying to do unit testing. It's hard to find code, so we basically allowed our QA testing to find the problems and fix them program by program. Something we haven't seen yet, but is possible because there are certain processes that we haven't gotten to, is that automatic archive situations could be in place, but Windows doesn't do automatic archiving. Another impact was the use of the VMS system with their versioning, is they had one temporary directory for all users' temporary files. And it was based on terminal number and versioning. And since Windows, if you put everybody into one temporary file, we had multiple instances of files not, being blowing up because they already existed, things like that. Our solution, or Gary's solution, which was a good one, was to use the Windows temporary folder on the individual PC as the temporary file. Unfortunately, that caused some problems in that certain temporary files were actually used by further programs by other users, so we had to go back and create another real temporary folder within the main directory structure for those individual files, and those had to be handled on a case-by-case basis.
And talk a little bit about how we took the COM files to the BATs.
Yeah, that was actually the scheduled processes from the batch queue were relatively simple because you basically stripped out the part that reinitialized the run of the thing and added it to the Windows task scheduler. So that was pretty simple, once you cleaned up the VMS specific code. Going through the VM command, the files that were built within the actual source code and changing those to xcall spawn, we ended up with a lot of hard-coded VMS file structures in these command files. A lot of things were just hard-coded, as we said early on in the presentation. So we created a bunch of new environment variables for these specific applications and embedded those into all the command files, and everything seems to be working pretty clean right now.
Excellent. Thank you. So we have a Mr. Print on this project, and that Mr. Print happens to be from Ireland.
Yes, when we came to it, as I'm sure many here are aware, under VMS, you've got print queues. You'll have things set up to say, this printer prints on printer number 1, which just exists within your application, not within the operating system. We have attached printers, continuous feed printers, we had label printers, and everything was controlled by escape sequences. We had coding there, as I'm sure everyone has, that says, if you've got a printer, a dot matrix printer plugged directly into the back of your terminal, send an escape sequence that means everything I'm sending to the screen really goes to the printer instead and switches back. One of the decisions, that was the first question that we asked on the on-site engagement, was saying, how much of this stuff do you still want to support, or do you want to go purely to laser printers and Windows printing? And they said, okay, do that. So effectively we basically ignored all the code that related to escape sequences and all of that, because otherwise we could have drowned in that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And what we did instead was we wrote a new class with methods to support printing to PDF using the syn PDF, printing using the print API either directly to a printer or to previewing to screen, and something that the staff found very handy was basically taking the output and just dumping it straight into a text file, which allowed them to import it into Excel. And so we gave a dialog that did that. And instead of trying to build into the application which users could access which printers, we agreed with Mike that the operating system, the Windows operating system, would control all of that. So what we had basically was a class that did all the printing, and then we had a very thin layer between the application and the printing class. So all we needed to know from the application was, I want to print something, here's what I want to print, and I've finished. The print classes worked out things that give the option. For example, if you say, I'm printing landscape or portrait, it worked out the font size, the lines per page. It knew when you needed to take a page break rather than the application saying, every 60 lines throw a new page. So we did that. Also, then when we asked at the start, we said, so do you do anything that's out of the ordinary, or is it all plain? No, it's all plain text. Nothing changes font. There's no lines. There's no boxes. No logos. No pictures. So of course, we went into it. What are all these strange characters in my report? Oh, it's trying to print a barcode there. Where's the logo on my purchase order? Why are there no boxes around my purchase order? So we added all those into the class. But again, it was relatively simple because there were obscure calls in the original code, but once it got into we had one piece of code we had to change, which was in the class that basically said, oh, they want to print a logo, they want to draw boxes and lines, and that was fine. So the other aspect that we did then was the label printing. And as you can see, this is a very specialist area. It's a lot of barcodes, fonts, and things like that. And as Don said, this drives the whole process. of basically the jobs moving through the whole operation. And rather than try to code all of that and repeat all of that in Synergy, we used a third-party product called Bartender, which I think is probably about the most widely used product worldwide for printing barcodes. And instead of all the very complex coding, so I should have said, by the way, we didn't have to touch any of the lines of code in the entire application to support the printing that we put in. And that meant we were able to do that very quickly indeed. With Bartender, however, there was a lot of complex coding to say exactly how to draw each of these boxes and go to this font and print the barcode and whatever. Completely unintelligible to anyone coming into it. So we stripped that code out, and instead what Bartender expects is a simple text file. So you create a file with the data. All you need to do is identify the data that's needed for the label, create it in a text format, and put it into a directory that, or a folder that corresponds to the printer they want to print it on. Then we drew the templates within Bartender, and I think we were able to come up with a more pleasing effect in some cases, because we were, we didn't have to faithfully replicate. We were able to say, well, how do you want these to look? And so we tidied up fonts and styles and things like that. And then we set up the automation tasks within Bartender that simply says, monitor this folder, and if you find a file that looks like this in this folder, apply this template and send it out. So again, we were able to do that relatively easily.
Nice job. So again, what we're talking about is a lift in place plus. So I think this part of it really kind of underlines that part. So not only did we do exactly what they have today and seamlessly and quickly, but I think we gave them a lot of things that they didn't have before, such as what, PDF maybe, and extract to Excel files. And this Bartender allows them to add more labels more efficiently and more quickly. So well done.
Yeah, and reprints. Mike said that was a big thing they couldn't do before.
But again, under the project, no impact to the business, and considering the short time to market as well. And last but definitely not least on the team is our QA engineer, Deb Hofmann.
Well, I always say that I have the best part of the job because these guys get to bake the cake and I get to eat it. So I have the best part by far. And so we really took a three-step approach to the QA. First, we did our unit testing, and that's where our staff made sure that the application didn't fall over. And so by the time I got to consume the product, we had just an amazingly stable product, and couple dozen blow-ups, which quite honestly, when you look at how complex this software was just absolutely amazing. Now, realizing that we were taking it from VMS to Windows and we weren't making a lot of changes, but still there were definitely idiosyncrasies between going from VMS to Windows that gave us some blow-ups. But the nice thing is that we were able to go through the software and intuitively go through, and so not being an expert in printing by any means, I was able to go through the software and intuitively do what made sense to me. Where there was a problem, we were able to get it into GitLab, like Sharon had mentioned, document the issue. The developers were able to make the changes, make the corrections, and we were able to move forward. So by the time we were done with the QA process, and now we're going into the unit testing with our client, they're really going to see a stable product. But what we decided to do with our client, and this made so much sense, Mike picked out the team leaders of the different areas of the software. And so the people that were in charge of the coding area, the job area, the accounting area, and just made sure that we had the person who really knew the software, that they used it day in and day out, and they were the experts in their area. And so what we did is we scheduled time where the client was actually now going to see the software maybe for the first time. Sometimes they had been in it, for a couple of days, but take a job all the way from where they started their day on a daily basis and take the software through what they did on a normal daily basis and see if we found any additional issues in addition to the things that I found during the QA process. And what we did, and this made so much sense, we did a go-to-meeting session. I actually gave control to the client or to the employee, and they actually ran the software and I watched. And so it was really great because we were able to talk about some of the hotkey changes that they were going to start to need to get used to, and by having the person, like I said, Mike was really smart. He picked out the person in charge of the area, start to get them excited about using the software, seeing the fact that it's not a whole new system. It's very much like they were used to using, and so getting their confidence level up, because the person now who's in charge of the department is going to be responsible for getting the rest of the team excited and engaged in using the new software. And so by getting their excitement level up, we were able to find some of the things that needed to be changed. But once we go live, boy, I don't think we're going to see very much, if anything, that we didn't find ahead of time. So just having that 3-step process really, really made a whole lot of sense. And I think they're going to see a real solid product, when we go live. So very exciting.
Thank you, Deb. So just to kind of sum it up and tie a bow around it, I said this earlier this week, I love my job. I get to work with really bright people, and these are the guys that make it happen. I get to work with great people and solve problems, and I believe that's what we're doing for Mike. It's a team effort. Testing at each phase, test again, make sure your ducks in a row. Do not scrimp on testing. Communications is key. Every day we talk as a team. Every week we talk with the client. There's never a disconnect. Don't reinvent the wheel. Again, I just cannot believe the productivity that Sharon was able to get out of Git. Unbelievable that we're using these tools, okay? Guard the scope, but improve where you can. Makes everybody happier, leads to a better project. I will turn over the presentation to the panel for questions. Mike, I don't want to put you on the spot. Anything you'd like to add?
I think what I need to say is thank you. I mean, we're very close.
Yes.
But this is an extension of my team. I feel like they're on my side. And we've worked really, really well together with the testing, the coding, and it's of my professional, which is the last 25 years in technology, this has probably been the smoothest project. We'll knock on wood, but I think it's going really, really, really well. I think that's what I want to say is for you and your team, and for Synergex. I was thrown into this job. I started with Hudson in December. I think it was my second week. I had a conference call and says, "We're coming out in January. We're starting this project." And so I was really thrown into this project, and it's been easy for me. This is the easiest part of my job is working with your team.
We appreciate that. I don't want to jinx us, like Mike said, okay? We're in UAT. UAT is going really well, so I'm very comfortable. We're going to have a smooth transition. Our next phase of after we're through UAT, I believe Gary's going to go out there and just kind of babysit the cutover, but we don't anticipate any issues because we have done the job already. So with that, I'd like to open up to questions, if anybody has questions of myself or the panel.
Mine's not really a question, it's more to validate your process. We were one of those companies that had a lot of technology, character-based terminals. We had to change our entire infrastructure, and a project that we had, and RCC had reached out, Synergy had reached out to us and wanted to assist us, so they invited us up. We brought all our problems on the table and told them what all we were working on, and I can't begin to tell you how well that worked out for us. It was probably one of the easiest things we've done, and since then, I'm pretty much a loudmouth about I'd do it again and again and again. It was just that good of a process. We're working on enhancements now, and so I just wanted to validate that to you guys because you guys are getting ready to turn over. It went really well for us, and we had a lot of challenges, from the technology to the hardware to the networking to the everything, and it was a good process. I just wanted to validate that.
One of the points that you made is the fact that now you're positioned to do enhancements to the software. And one of the things that we knew that we wanted to do was enhance their security system to allow them to maintain their role-based configuration and security, right? So we're doing that all with newer technology and Synergy.net and all that. And it's just going to tie right into this system. It's going to be kind of like the first thing on the outside of this whole existing application, but give them a great example of how we can now take this to the next level if they want to. So, thank you.
I just have one quick question. I feel your pain on printing barcodes. I've done that. Okay, so we did it for retread tires in my software. But I was just curious on the other half of it, when you print the barcode, do you have scanners that are reading those barcodes and using those, or are they just printed for another purpose?
No, not at this time, but that is my current vision, is to move it to that. So we will be using that because we get a lot of data in. Right now the system gathers a lot of data and we know it's there. That's why we're moving to this, so we can actually extend to barcodes and all the other information that we need to extrapolate.
The barcodes are not printed for production purpose. They're printed.
They are for production and as part of the flow. Eventually we're going to extend in, because we get a lot of paper in that can be barcoded. We want to track that all the way through, and that's part of this system.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. We thank you for your time. Everybody's around today. Please track us down at lunch. Love to talk about it. Enjoy your lunch.